There's a whole lot of groaning going on in this world. There are the low groans of discouragement and despair at corruption, greed, bullying, and injustice run amok. There are the aching groans of an abused creation as we human creatures continue to pour 2.5 million pounds of carbon dioxide into the air and dump 8 billion metric tons of plastic into the ocean every year. There are the heartbreaking groans of grief and heartache as dozens were shot down in Gaza last week, and as the 22nd school shooting of 2018 alone took place on Friday in Texas. The groaning of this troubled world is overwhelming. It echoes in the very depths of our souls. It would be easy to become resigned to the madness. Effortlessly, we could yield to the despair and pessimism that permeate the world and put gloomy bumper stickers on our cars announcing the end is near. But that is not where God leads us. God leads us to listen in love to every earthly groan, and beyond the groaning, God leads us into a resilient hope, into a faithful courage, into the unquenchable fire of the Spirit of God, the Spirit of love. By the time St. Paul wrote to the Romans, he had witnessed and endured a great deal of suffering, and he knew there was more to come. Yet when Paul writes of the groaning of the whole creation, he speaks not of sorrowful groaning, nor of outraged or discouraged groaning, nor does he propose that the end is near. Instead, he writes of a more hopeful kind of groaning, the groaning of labor pains. Now, I don't know how Paul gained his firsthand knowledge of the groans that accompany labor pains, but anyone who has ever been within earshot of a woman who is close to giving birth naturally has probably heard those unmistakable groans. Groans of both discomfort and determination. Groans of pain with a purpose. The purpose of bringing new life into this world. I remember well my own groans in childbirth. I'm sure Russ does too. And I'll confess that the second time around, those groans were accompanied by some colorful swearing. Labor pains turned the vocabulary of this ordinarily mild-mannered pastor into that of an exasperated sailor, bringing new life into this world can be chaotic and clamorous. St. Paul was in faith grappling with the suffering, the frenzied groaning of his time and place, even as we grapple with the suffering and groaning of our own time. Yet, what does he preach? He preaches hope. Paul does not preach that the end of the world is coming. He is not in this letter preparing for an apocalypse. He is suggesting rather that the whole world is groaning in labor pains, giving birth to something new and holy, giving birth to the children of God. He preaches, I consider that the present suffering is nothing compared to the glory that is to come. The whole world waits with breathless anticipation for the revealing of the sons and daughters of God. A Chicago pastor, Shannon Kirshner, reminded me last word that this wonderful Greek word, apokaradokia, not quite as long as supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, apokaradokia, translated as eager longing or breathless anticipation, refers to stretching out your neck to see. It calls for sticking out your neck. Hope is not passive, it is active. It requires stretching. I watched the royal wedding yesterday morning. How many of you watched the royal? Almost all of you, that's amazing. The Reverend Michael Curry, in his stirring marriage homily, quoted our dear brother Martin, who said, "We must discover the power of love, the redemptive power of love. And when we discover that, we will be able to make out of this old world a new world." St. Paul could hear the labor pains of that new world being born. Through the chaos and the clamor, may we hear the groans of the birth of love into this world. In love, let us listen closely and compassionately to those groans. In love, let us not yield to hopelessness, and let us not bow down to the corruption and greed and bullying and injustice that are run amok. In love, let us roll up our shirt sleeves and clean up the messes we've made. In love, let us put the guns in their place. In love, let us stick our necks out in breathless anticipation. In love and by the power of God's Spirit at work within us and among us in this world, let us make of this old world a new world. Amen.